It's like NBA playoff predictions, upsets, and more. We're going to do a quick rundown for you on all of that. And we're going to start in the West with the big West matchups. We'll do like a little 10-minute preview here, and then we'll be back tomorrow to do some more, and we'll go into the matchups in depth. But let's start in the West. Because the West, the crazy thing about the West is this is the first year I can remember that the first round, you can kind of, a lot of these matchups can go either way, right? You can kind of throw a blanket over the entire West and say these teams are so close. Like even Memphis and Golden State in the play-in, those teams are right there, right? So there's like the second seed is like 50-something wins. The third seed is 51 wins. The fourth seed is 50 wins. The next seed is 50 wins. The eighth seed is 48 wins. So the West is going to be very fascinating from an upset standpoint because some of these upsets won't really be upsets, right? So let's start. OKC, I think we're going to save them because of the fact that we don't know who the 8th seed is yet. The Warriors-Rockets, let's start there. A lot of people think the Warriors are going to win this game in a walkover, in this series in a walkover. I disagree. I think the Warriors will win the series because of the experience, because of Steph and Jimmy now, because now playoff Jimmy has now entered the fray, as we saw last night, 38 points. Looks like the player he was in Miami in the playoffs. Any concerns about whether he was washed in Miami, those are gone completely. So the Warriors are going to win that series, but I think it's going to be a long series because I think the Rockets have talent. The Rockets are going to try to get up and down the floor with their athleticism, with their youth. And the Warriors, hey, they're not a young team, right? Their best players are all in the latter part of their career. Their 3 best players. So they're not going to be able to run and gun the Rockets. Like, that's not what they want to do. They want to slow the game down. They want to get Steph, Jimmy. They want to get those guys the ball in the half court for the most part. They'll get Steph in some transition threes, but for the most part, even their young guys, Podminsky, Moody, they're not the most athletic, fast. The Rockets want to play that way with Thompson, with Jalen Green, obviously, with, even their big men, right? And when they bring, the kid from Villanova off the bench, right? And then obviously you have Sengun and you have Van Vliet and you have all these guys who play more of a half-court style, but they want to get up and down the court. They're a young team. They want to tire the Warriors out. That's what they're going to want to do. Now, the issue for the Rockets in this series is going to be what OKC went through last year against the Mavericks, right? OKC just wasn't ready yet. They were too young. And they were a better team last year than the Rockets are this year, even though the Rockets had a terrific season. They weren't ready. And I think the Rockets are going to find the same thing. They're not ready. As you can see, Bob Myers through my mirror there on the back of my screen, ironically. The Rockets, this is not their time yet. I think next year you'll see a better version of them in the playoffs. This year, I think they'll lose to Golden State, but I think it's going to go 6 or 7 games. Because I do think talent-wise, the Rockets can cause some problems for the Warriors in this series with their speed and athleticism. And they're going to put Amen Thompson on Curry. You can guarantee it. Amen Thompson is one of the best defenders in the league. He's that good. But I think ultimately, if Jimmy and Steph are going to play like they did last night, Golden State's going to win the series. So that's series number 1. Lakers-Wolves. Fascinating. Probably the most fun series of the entire playoffs, at least in the first round, right? You got Luka, LeBron, Anthony Edwards. Those maybe 3 of the top 4 or 5 most entertaining players in the league that you want to go pay to see in person. Well, you're getting them in this series. Now, from a matchup standpoint, it's not a great matchup for Minnesota. Now, I picked Minnesota to win this series, believe it or not. I wanted to pick an upset, and I think Minnesota could do it. But they don't match up well great against the Lakers. Because what the Lakers are going to do to the Timberwolves in this series is they're going to play 5 out at times with Hachimura and Finney-Smith as the 4 and 5. And they're going to play Conley and Gobert off the floor. And that doesn't help Minnesota. And Randall is going to have to guard guys in space, which he hasn't loved to do in his career. So The interesting thing to me is going to be, can Minnesota play a lineup and be successful of Dante, Ant, McDaniels, Julius Randle, and Naz Reid, if you want, maybe at times. Pick your 5 that's not Gobert. Can they be successful with that lineup? Because I think the Lakers are going to do everything they can to play Rudy off the floor. And to me, this series comes down to a couple things. LeBron and Luka are going to do their thing. You have to think Ant's going to do his thing. The X factors in this series, which will determine the series, in my opinion, is Austin Reeves on the Lakers side and Julius Randle on the Wolves side. If Randle needs to have a big series, this has got to be. Now, Randle, as we know, with the Knicks, he struggled in the playoffs. That was his big thing, right? Even in his 2 great years, he was all NBA. He was all NBA in his great years, right? But he struggled in the playoffs against the Hawks the first year. He was terrible. Against the Heat. Now, he got injured at the end of that season, sprained his ankle, just came back for the playoffs. His rhythm might have been off, but he wasn't great in that playoffs either. So he has a lot to gain here, and he has a big chip on his shoulder from 2 subpar playoff performances for his standards. And the Wolves need him to be that second scoring option that Towns was last year. If they get a big Randle series, I think the Wolves will win the series. If they don't, they're not going to win the series. That's what it comes down to. So I'm going to take Minnesota in 7, in LA, in game 7. But I'm nervous about that pick. Nervous about it. I'm kind of taking it as I want to pick an upset. But I do think the Lakers match up very well against the Wolves. And I like JJ's obviously done an amazing job there. But I'm going to take the T-Wolves in 7. The Knicks Pistons, last series we're going to do, and then we'll do the rest of them tomorrow. And we'll go through each one in depth. This is not going to be an easy series for the Knicks, for Knicks fans out there. The Knicks struggled with Detroit during the season. Detroit won 3 of 4. Now, they really won 2 out of 3. The last series, the Knicks didn't play Towns. Sorry, they didn't play Brunson. It wasn't a full complement of players. We're not going to count that series. Not to count that game. But the Knicks lost 2 home games to the Pistons this year. I was at both those games. They struggled with Cade. He killed them. And they played him as if they were going to double team him. And then they would leave Beasley, they would leave Hardaway, and those guys killed him from 3. Can't allow that this game. They got to play Cade straight up. They got to not let him hit those guys for 3 because the Pistons don't have a second scorer. That's their weakness. Good team. They're physical. They're tough. Bickerstaff's done a great job with them this year. They have a good bench, but they don't have a second scorer. They don't have a Robin. And to me, in the playoffs, if you don't have a Robin, you can't go very far. You can't win with one player. We saw that with the Knicks last year. Once they lost their guys, Brunson couldn't do it. And Brunson was as good as it gets last year in the playoffs. So, Cade, what the Knicks need to do is say, you know what? Let's let Cade do what Cade does. If he gets 30, he gets 30. We are not going to let Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway, those guys get off. Because if those guys get off, that's the only way Detroit can win this series. They got to cut down and stop the Detroit threes and their 3-point shooters. If they do that, the Knicks will win this series in 5 or 6. It's not a bad matchup from an offensive standpoint for the Knicks. The Pistons defense will not affect the Knicks that much in this series. They match up very well offensively with Detroit's defense. It's the defense that's going to determine, the Knicks defense is going to determine whether they win this series. I think ultimately they have too much talent. Detroit just doesn't have the high-end talent that the Knicks have. The Knicks have 2 guys that could go for 30 to 40 in a game. They have another 2 guys that can go for 20 to 25 in a game. And then you got some scoring punch on the bench with Deuce. You got some other guys off the bench that could get hot and Shamet or Payne, hit a few threes. Streaky players. The Knicks, to me, are going to have too much. I don't think the Pistons, like the Rockets, it's their first time in these playoffs. They're happy to be there. They're not ready for this yet. even if they have a good series. I expect them to play well, but I don't think they'll be ready for this yet. And as long as the Knicks keep their discipline on defense and don't leave the three-point shooters open, because Beasley killed the Knicks this year. He killed them, especially in the 2 home games, the 2 Knicks home games. If the Knicks can shut the water off on the Piston threes, they'll win this series in 5 or 6. If they don't, Detroit can steal the series. Ultimately, I think the Pistons inexperience. I think the Knicks offensively. And I think the fact that the Pistons, they're not going to have like a real home game in this series. The Pistons fan base hasn't been, it's not been up top tier of the last, since the Billup days, the Billups and Rip Hamilton days. And the Knicks fans will travel. They'll be there in the building. It's not going to be there's going to be plenty of Knicks fans in Detroit, I promise you. So I think that's going to be a factor for Detroit. They're not going to have the best home crowd in this series. So I like the Knicks in 5 or 6. So I like the Warriors over the Rockets, the Lakers, and the Wolves in 7. I'm going to take Minnesota, but I think I'm going to regret that. And I like the Knicks over the Pistons in 5 or 6. That's it for today. NBA predictions, preview, upsets. We're back tomorrow to do more of it. We'll get into some other stuff. I appreciate y'all. You're here on the Shot Clock. Peace.